Welcome back to Munchausen's Proxy, where we once more return to our examination of an increasingly irritating specimen known as Amazon Prime. This particular species of Hollywood vermin seems to delight in taking good ideas, or at least ideas with potential, and running them through a creative blender. Unlike their cousin, Netflix, a species that enjoys stringing its prey along by releasing a single good season of its product before completely buggering your brain with complete and utter nonsense thereafter, Amazon seems to be a particularly bipolar or possibly schizophrenic creature. In its insanity, it enjoys spending tens of millions of dollars on projects with no idea what good actually looks like, and seemingly does not care. One project will be great, while the very next will be the worst thing to ever be broadcast for public consumption. Often the results are somewhere in between, with more and more leaning towards the latter these days. Oh, sorry. This is the spoiler review for episode 6 of The Peripheral. In case you missed it in my intro, I was less than pleased. Quite a bit of that festivity came from a new character, but I will get to that later. I would like to say the Peripheral was improving, but it is actually going in the opposite direction. For those who have watched all of my reviews for this show thus far, you know I started out fairly positive, my first review being nigh glowing in its praise. Especially considering we just finished with the first season of The Rings of Power a mere couple of weeks prior, and I was still quite irate over making myself watch 8 hours of literary molestation by a couple of hacks from Jar Jar Abrams' workshop out at Bad Reboot. Having seen the commercials for this show at the end of one of those episodes, I was actually looking forward to seeing what promised to be an interesting near-future sci-fi effort. But here we are in the 6th episode, and we just seem to be sliding backwards. Oh well, on to it. We begin this week basically reliving the scene from the last episode where B-Lady showed Alita what she and RI were doing in such secrecy. Turns out the Marine in the clip she showed Alita was indeed Connor getting his limbs blown off. It was the Texas outback in 2028, and Burton is looking through a sniper scope at a dog caught in some barbed wire. He suggests just shooting the dog since they had intel that the enemy was using animals to lure troops in to be blown up. Connor warns him that he will knock his teeth out if he does, and then goes to help the dog. He has the dog almost completely freed from the barbed wire when he notices that the dog has wires coming out from him from an unhealed surgical scar. He has just enough time to realize he is screwed before the dog detonates. And Connor wakes up from reliving the moment in a dream. Burton comforts him in his trailer, asking if it was the same one. Connor affirms while he's trying to get himself together. Then it is off to the cliffs of Dover in England for this week's ire-raising introduction. A woman is walking a dog along the cliffs when she is met by another younger woman who talks to her about the murder of Thug by a peripheral, Flynn's peripheral. And then the opening sequence rolls. Back in North Carolina, Deputy Dumbass is trying to find the invisible cars he logged into impound that he found near Flynn's place, suspecting that one of them was the car that hit him and made off with old Hitman. The clerk he is asking tells him they are not in the system and that he needs to talk to the sheriff if he has questions. His nose starts to bleed and his face is pretty messed up, so he goes to the bathroom to clean up. In the bathroom, the sheriff comes in and tells him to take time off until he heals up, that he needs to learn to control his enthusiasm before it gets him killed. Then the sheriff starts whistling the same tune that the guy who dragged the hitman away did, and Deputy Dumbass notices the sheriff is wearing the same shoes. Back in 2099, Wilf and Flynn are talking about what Flynn did going into RI as they loiter near the Thames River. Flynn notices that the other people on the street keep their distance from them and asks about it. Wilf gets an uncomfortable smile on his face and tells her they are not real, that it is an augmentation, tech invented by RI to make the world seem less bleak and empty. He then shows her that not all of the buildings she sees are exactly as they appear either, showing her that a lot of them are ruins waiting to be restored. Marveling at what she is seeing, Flynn tells Wilf that Boss Lady wants what Alita stole, and he takes her to see a fabricator in hopes of finding out what it was based on the chips and the implant they found at Alita's hideout. As they go, Flynn asks him if Alita could have hidden what she stole in the past, and he said it is entirely possible. The fabricator fronts as a butcher shop, and he is reluctant to talk to them despite Wilf giving the password. Flynn taunts him into talking to them, and they go in the back. Flynn, somehow, figures out they are the two who piloted the doctor peripherals who operated on Burton's peripheral in order to implant Eyeball Lady's eye for the heist. A fight ensues wherein Wilf's main job seems to be to make sure nobody leaves prematurely, while Flynn beats both butchers into submission. The male butcher then tells Flynn and Wilf that he thinks the Neoprims were the ones who had him do the surgery when they ask him about Alita. At no point, before or after this scene, do they define Neoprim. As Flynn and Wilf walk out, she randomly asks him if he ever told Alita about what he did to save his school, while he slowly, extremely slowly and incompetently, cleans the blood spatter on her face from the fight. What the hell was that all about? Never mind. I'm sure the scene had to happen for reasons? They never connect the face washing, telling Alita scene to anything else in this episode. Maybe they were going for intimate, given how close Wilf was standing to Flynn, but even that is stupid. Moving on. Connor is having trouble connecting his wheelchair to his reverse trike outside the bar where he left it the night before. Getting out some tools, he starts to fix it. Nerdy McNerdface from the print shop just so happens to be coming by and offers to help. Connor asks if someone from inside called him, and he tries not to say before acknowledging that they did. Connor yells at the bar that they could have come out and helped him themselves. McNerdface suggests that they are scared of him. When Connor asks if he's scared too, he admits he is before starting to help, making Connor laugh. While they work, he asks McNerdface about the tech that Flynn uses to hook into the peripheral. McNerdface tries to resist telling him about it when Connor admits that he used it, and Burton knows about it. The kid then tells him it's pretty advanced. Connor asks if it's advanced enough for him to hook in and stay in the future. McNerdface says he isn't a doctor, but he thinks his real body would give out pretty quickly. Back in 2099, Ash is shown making a peripheral for Connor. A Burton peripheral is sitting in a tub already complete. Nerd Thug, whose name turns out to be Ossian, comes in as she's finishing Connor's. She jokes that turning it on is the Sistine Chapel moment. Deputy Dumbass is getting checked out by Doc Dee, who happens to be Deputy Dumbass's fiancée. That's a lot of D's going on. Doc Dee tells him he is concussed and probably has whiplash, and he should be taking it easy. He has a flashback to the crash while she's examining him with a scanner, and he tried to play it off like it's fine. She tells him they both know who did it and that he should just lay low. Her obligation to the clinic is up in a bit, and then they can just leave town forever. Deputy Dumbass says he can't just walk away from things as they stand, and leaves after kissing her. At the Pickett house, Pickett is making dinner with old Hitman sitting unconscious in a chair at the kitchen counter, a collar around his neck. As he wakes, he tries to attack Pickett, and Pickett's wife shocks him until he drops to the floor, nearly unconscious. Pickett asks Hitman who hired him to kill the siblings. He explains he is getting tired of people effing around in his town. The siblings' cousin is with Connor in Burton's trailer. Leon offers to help Connor with the pain and nightmares. He uses his tech implants to sync with Connor, catching flashbacks of his memories and dropping to the floor with pain. When he gathers himself, he notices Connor has fallen asleep and he smiles. Ash, meanwhile, is looking through some records from Flynn's time and curses. Ossian notices and asks her how complicated she thinks things are getting. She replies that she thinks the virus that Flynn has in her optic center of her brain might be the tech that Alita had her steal during the heist. That Alita stored it in Flynn's brain via the eye surgery and download. It is at this point that the woman from the beginning of the show arrives at Lev's door. She's an inspector with the Met, Reed Metropolitan Police, looking into the murder of Thug by Flynn. She asks to see Lev and Wilf when Ossian answers the door. When he tells Lev that she is there, Lev tells Ossian to call his father's lawyers, but the phones are down and the inspector knows they are both there since she asks for them by name. Lev warns Wilf not to lie to the inspector, that some of them have the ability to not only tell truth from lie, but to make lying impossible around them. And in any case, she probably knows the answers to any questions she asks anyway. Back at Burton's place, Deputy Dumbass comes to see him to tell him that the hitman was sprung, suggesting that the sheriff rammed him and took the hitman to deliver him to Pickett. Burton tries to warn Deputy Dumbass to back off, that there are forces out to get him and Flynn, and the next ambush might kill him. Deputy Dumbass gets an even stupider look on his face, telegraphing that his dumbass will not be backing off. Pickett is in the sheriff's office, telling him that he is worried Deputy Dumbass might stick his nose into things. Pretty good guess. The sheriff makes placating noises and then leaves him in the office to use the sheriff's computer. By the way, the infantile title of this episode, Off and Eat, are the idiotic caricatures of a sheriff's password for his computer. That is the level of creativity we have going on here, folks. While that is going on, Pickett's wife is back at the house with the hitman. Alone. In the house with the hitman. Alone. Yeah, you can see why this episode was just hitting all of my irritation zones. Anyway, she tells the hitman that she has a bet with her husband that she can get him to talk, and since they did not specify the subject, they can talk about anything and she will win. He starts talking about the large fish tank in the room, slipping a metal statuette off the coffee table when she isn't looking. He walks over to the tank and hits the glass twice before she can stun him with the collar, but the damage is done. The tank breaks and the water goes cascading all over the room. She goes to stun him again in anger, but he grabs her arm when she does, and she gets jolted and knocked out. He recovers, and they cut the scene, leaving the audience to assume that he escapes with the remote. In Lev's sitting room, he, Wilf, Ash, and Ossian are congregated for the inspector and her assistant. And this was the capper on the dumbest, most irritating episode thus far in this series. I do not know where the person playing the inspector learned to act, but holy crap is she bad at it. She is so cartoony and over the top that I wonder how many takes it took them to get this scene in, because I would have had a hard time taking this garbage seriously. She begins by suggesting that Wilf might save himself by informing on bigger fish, hinting the bigger fish is Lev. And it was done so flamboyantly I could barely stand to watch the rest of the episode. As a matter of fact, the note I wrote down was holy what the f***. Getting past that, the inspector asks to see the peripherals that have been detected in the house, and their operators, ASAP. Connor is making breakfast when Burton shows up to check on him. bringing him an arm the folks in the future had printed out. He tells them there are legs coming too. Connor says the VA gave him some, but that he doesn't wear them because he doesn't want other people to forget what he is missing. That when he wears the prosthetics, they can pretend what was sacrificed is still there. Burton then mentions that Nerdy McNerdface told him about Connor's plan to live in his peripheral permanently. They talk about Connor asking Burton to kill him when he was in the hospital right after the explosion, and how the request really messed Burton up. They are then summoned to the print shop, and all three jack into their peripherals to talk to the inspector. And they end the episode with the inspector introducing herself to Flynn. That was it. That's the episode. As I have already stated, this episode was crap. Complete crap. There was not a single scene that stood out as working, with the possible exception of the Sistine Chapel moment scene. Nearly every other scene had some ire-raising or just plain dumb aspect to it. The opening scene with Burton's unit would have worked 3 or more episodes ago. Now, it is just recapitulating what B-Bait already showed Alita. The less said about the inspector, the more coherent this review will be, so I will save her for the end. Deputy Dumbass is still a dumbass, with zero acting range and an imbecilic expression glued on his face. Even in a scene where he should be finding some other expression, like pretending he is in love with his fiancée, all we get is dumb face. The sheriff, combined with how the inspector is portrayed, makes me think the people running this show have never met a cop in any circumstance other than a traffic stop. They are both wild caricatures. The sheriff, a good old boy from Hicksville, and the inspector, an imitation of a smart, strong female character, mixed with a flamboyant drag queen performing clownishly for an audience, and not talking to or like real people would. I seriously have no idea what they are doing with Wilf. There's a good character there given the backstory we have already gotten on him, but the writers have no idea how to write it seemingly. Flynn was a mere passenger this episode. Blink and you miss her. Ash and Ossian are furniture, mere placeholders for specific plot points to either function through or around, with no depth or real purpose that could not be served by a robot. Pickett was not in the show enough to acquire many idiocy points, but leaving his wife at home alone with a hitman get him at least one. Mrs. Pickett is a ridiculously written character as well. The Irish actress who plays her is going a little overboard with the Southern Belle routine. Connor and Nerdy McNerdface were probably the only two decent characters this entire episode. Maybe Burton as well, but he was not in much and he pretty much gave baseline Burton. Connor, however, is being masterfully played by Eli Goree. He is an actor I do not recall from anything else, but he has Connor down pat. Nerdy McNerdface has been a background character up to this point, for the most part. He had one good scene with Connor, and he played the shy, nervous, timid geek pretty well, and has throughout the season. Which leads us back to the inspector. In doing the review, I looked up the actress in hopes of finding something to indicate why she was so bad. I was not overly surprised, given her appearance, to learn she is transgender. Nor was I surprised to see that most of the credits on the bio for Alexandra Billings were not overly impressive until recently. Inspector Ainsley Lowbeer would not be a character out of place in a drag show or overacted community theater show. She is flamboyantly arrogant, and the dialogue the writers gave her to recite is overly eccentric dreck, Scribblings fit only for flushing down the toilet after you finish wiping yourself with the pages it was written on. They are attempting to introduce the inspector to us as this would-be Sherlock Holmes parody, a seemingly know-it-all who knows what everybody is going to do or say before they actually do. There is nothing to the character outside of that, and it brings everything else in every scene the character is in down, because there is nothing for the other actors to play off of, especially given how the responses are written. Wilf is silent in his bewilderment. Ossian is shaking in fear because of his casually mentioned criminal history. Ash is also mute for the most part. And Lev sits there with a mockery of his usual suave smile and relaxed poise. They have written the inspector as some kind of omniscient, omnipotent being come down to pass judgment, and none of the characters, thus far, can gainsay that judgment. And while I focused mainly on the characters in this review, it's because they were almost universally bad, and the storyline did not get much better than last week. Little was advanced, little was developed, not even the characters. Hell, there wasn't even any exposition that we did not already know about. I would take a dozen more episode 4s over 5 minutes of episode 6, especially if those 5 minutes had the inspector in them. This was trash from a group of people who managed to produce a premiere episode that lured me in with some actual hope that Amazon Prime Studios actually had someone in charge who knew what the hell they were doing. Instead, we have seen a steady decline every episode, with the show falling off a cliff this episode. The main cast is better than the showrunner and the writers are showing, and we know that because they showed us in the first episode. I don't know what they plan for the next 2 episodes, but if they have a hope in hell of keeping some semblance of an audience going into season 2, it better be good. I think I will leave it there for now. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and leave a comment or constructive criticism down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Tschüss.